publicly so it's easily shareable.
Okay, hi Alex. Here we are. I'm Eryc Taylor, the artistic director of the company, of course, and I'm joined by Alex, one of the dancers in the company. Please introduce yourself for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Alex Tenreiro Theis. I am a company dancer with Eryc Taylor Dance. I've been with us for till since 2017, so for a long time now. And yeah, and I've been working on Uncharted Territories with Eryc and the rest of our dancers. So
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. It's been such a journey. I cannot believe next week will be exactly a year since the pandemic started, since we started Uncharted Territory. And I kind of want to go back to the beginning of when I first conceived of the project and then connected with you guys, because I don't think we had seen each other for a while.
mm-hmm.
And and then we all met on Zoom. I think we met in Zoom on Zoom at the end of March. I think it was
End of March, beginning of April, because we finished Earth that past November, and then we took holiday break, and we were warming up in the beginning, and then we didn't really like meet, and then the city shut down, and it was gone, and everything was stagnant and silent, and it took a couple weeks, I think. So I think it was early April by the time.
early April. Yeah, and then it was, and we didn't know what was happening. And just to have us connect on Zoom, which we had never done before, was just a whole new way of starting to work and meet on this in this virtual space. And then now the whole world is doing this. So um, but let's go back to when we first started and I presented the idea to you guys. And at that point, it was only let's come up with random choreography through this chart that I designed,
Mhm.
and this spreadsheet. And you guys were given randomized sequences that had to do with ballet directives, adjectives, quality, dynamic, timing. And I want to know from you specifically how that process was for you, as that was what became the first phase of, like, almost, I think, 4 or 5 phases of the project, and it developed over time. And we'll talk about that. But how was that creation process for you?
Yeah. I remember when we started, and it was super bare bones. It was super, let's just try and move and do it together, but separately. Like it was definitely because I think Nicole reached out to you first and was like, "Hey, we need to do something. Like we need to be together in this time." And so when we first started putting these things together, we had like the similar vocabulary of almost kind of a Cunningham inspired random do something from a word that inspires you. And from there, it was interesting because it's funny for the first month, that April month is almost hard to remember for me because it was such a dark time emotionally, mentally, and there's these little pockets of like I remember sitting in my room being like, okay, I can do a jump. What jump do I do? Like it was like something to like dig your nails into and like hold on to. And that's really kind of all I remember of the beginning is just having something to dig into artistically and still choreograph something and still make art, and then having those weeks where we kept coming back to it, and then we did another one and then we added something else. We made more adjectives and different categories of this string, and then building it together, and also like everybody had a different way of approaching it, and just having that communication also artistically was so necessary at that time.
Yeah,
And
I think so too. It was wonderful for me. I was going through a very dark time emotionally, as all of us were, but it was especially very dark for me, but to have this project and you guys working on something and knowing that whatever it was, there was going to be a, a goods delivered, so to speak. Like you guys, and you guys all had the same chart, different sequences, but it was so amazing for me as a director developing this project, and as we went to see how different all of your phrases became, your sequences and your phrases became. And we did that for 4 weeks, right? I think we did that.
Yeah, we had 4 phrases by the
four,
end of those weeks.
right. And then documentation was a big part of it. And your process was very detailed. Can you tell me a little bit, tell us a little bit about how detailed your process became? Like, what did you use and how did you organize yourself? Because I know you're a very organized person, and how did you organize? Because so for those of you who don't know, the randomized sequences of numbers became phrases of a chart that you had to decode and put. So how did you organize that, and what was your process?
Right. So actually, I have my notebook here to show everyone, because it was an interesting kind of delve back into my college self a little bit, because I, as a person, love patterns, and I excel at math, I excel at science. So I love the like formula based like organization. And all through college, when I would choreograph, it was sequences that I would then like, I would picture it out, I would draw it out. I was very visual with whatever pattern or sequence I was creating. So when Eryc, you gave us this list of like A2 and B5 and C, 16. We had this huge grid of all of these adjectives, and you had to like cross through. It was a little bit like that war. What's the war game where you have to guess the tile and sink the ship? Battleship.
Battleship, yes.
Battleship. You have to like find which word you were using. And so for my brain, I needed to look at it as a list of what exactly I had to work with. So I created, let me see if I can find some of these first. Yes, so I first created this like list of what was an A category, B category, C, and D category. And then we had groups of them. So it was like A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And so I listed them so I could see all of them, which category, and then what order they were. And then from there, I kind of started messing with it from there, because we had, I think we had 8 sequences of 4 for our first sequence. And then I created my own little chart of all the different words and letters and things that I could use. And then I had something to look at, and then I had something to like read and look through and see, okay, these words have similar meaning, these words have similar meaning. And then also there was, the first 2 categories were very like movement inspiring, and then the second 2 categories were more of a flavor, a quality, something I could augment the first 2. So I actually started pairing numbers and groups so that I had a movement and a quality to go along with it. That helped with shortening the sequence a little bit because it was so many numbers. But then it was able to shorten it and give me something that I could be like, okay, I'm going to, like the first one, ripple through the body, lead with the head. So I had that. And then I could also add on, well, it's a trembling, controlled reach of the head. So it had something to go from there. And then I would kind of create each one individually and then figure out which one attached best to where. So I shuffled the whole list. I did nothing in the right order, which was fun to see later, because I think Nicole, Chris really dedicated themselves to that like sequence, which was really cool to see when you put them side by side.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of didn't stay in the sequence strand. You kind of mixed everything together and came up with your own kind of phrasing and your own chart within a chart, right? Is that kind of what you did?
Yeah.
So what are some things you learned about yourself going, you mentioned that this was kind of reminded you of going back into your college days
Mm.
because of, of course, as dancers, we take, uh, composition, choreography, and, improv. And so what did you learn? What are some things you learned about yourself? Given the circumstances, we're in a pandemic, we have no idea what's going on, and you're working on these this randomized sequence of choreography. Are there some things that you learned about yourself along the way or through the early process of this,
Mm.
as far as patience or um, allowing the creativity or not to come through? Were there some things that were more challenging or a breath of fresh air? But are there specific things that you learned about yourself going into this process?
I think so, and I think some of them were almost painful to know about myself. Like I as a person up until that point, as a dancer, as a freelance dancer who makes my own schedule and coordinates everything and puts everything to a block, it was very hard for me to settle on a time to work on it because I
Mm.
had designed my schedule around physical locations that I went to. Okay, I'm going to Gibney at 10, and then I have to be at Mima by noon, and then I have to be at the PT clinic by 6. And so that made my schedule. And so when I'm thinking about time and okay, I'm going to dedicate an hour to this, my procrastination really like showed its really ugly head of we'll do it later. We don't need to do it now. It's fine. And so some of it really came down to, oh no, we're showing this on Monday. Here I am Sunday, and I have to create a whole sequence, and it like created that daunting feeling of like, oh no, I have to do this. So I had to kind of wrangle with that at the very beginning and trying to motivate myself without a place to go, without a place to be. And I've never really been a claustrophobic person. I've always really enjoyed small spaces. And I, being a small person, 5'1" person, like enjoy those small spaces. But when my whole life became a small space, all I wanted to do was cuddle up in a small corner and stay there.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, and to remind viewers that it was titled Uncharted Territory, Dancers in Isolation. So the fact that you guys had to create these phrases under such confines added a whole nother layer to it. Plus, you live with your partner, Ryan. And I know that he was in the other room while you were trying to do this. So you were, I remember, on the balcony, in your bedroom, in the kitchen. And
Exactly. No, and we had a hard time negotiating that space because we as a funny circle of events, right? So when the pandemic shut down, it shut down on the 23rd. My birthday is the 21st of March, which we're going to be premiering on. But on the 21st, we moved into this very small apartment. And mind you, it was a nice step up. It was, the quality of living really stepped up a notch. So that's why we did it and why we kind of rushed into it because the city was locking down. So
right.
we wouldn't be able to book a moving company to actually move. So we'd be stuck in our old apartment. And so we rushed into this space, but then our living room became a great room. It was our entertaining space. It was our office. It was the kitchen. Really, even doesn't have a wall either, and you can kind of see that in the film as well. There's not a barrier between kitchen, desk, office space, and the living room, and that's it. And then the bedroom was very, very small. So we could fit our queen size bed, our dresser, and that was about it. And we only had about 5 feet by 3 feet of walking space
Mhm.
in the bedroom. And so Ryan, with his job, he needed to be at the desk. He had to be at his computer. And he has a lot of phone calls that he takes. And so I couldn't make any noise while I was in that space. So in order to create the phrases and move around, I had to go into the bedroom. So not only do we have this small space, but then we have an even smaller space that I have to work in. So
Right.
it made it even more challenging because we had all those ballet moves as our second category. So to do a pas de chat, like in this incredibly small space, it was very challenging to work through because I couldn't just bop my leg anywhere. It had to be on this angle because that's the deepest space I had.
Right. Right. And I think that although those were such strict confines and parameters, the result was thrilling for me to watch. I mean, I really thought that that you conveyed all of that so much in your choreography, this restriction, but going out, like there was this polarity that was happening with what you delivered on in the choreography. So moving into the second phase was um, I wanted to develop what we had created and add narrative and add a character. And I know that some dancers in the company uh, like that idea, but some were like, "Oh God, this is another thing now, like adding a character." And when we developed Earth, I was very adamant about when we were working with the guest choreographers that I wanted to create narrative, something for the audience to understand, and especially for this first, what I knew and already decided that this was going to be a film. I don't know how it was going to be a film. I don't know how we were going to do a photo shoot through Zoom. I don't know how it was going to happen, but I kind of projected into the future and said, this is going to be a film. And I think each of them should have their own characters. We should take this further. It can't just be random movement and just rehearse for the sake of rehearsing random movement. We need to like have an end goal. So I knew in my head that I wanted to give you guys assignments and create narratives. And you went like one of the things I love about working with you is that when you commit, you commit. And then when you were developing your character, you gave your character a name, a backstory, a job that she lost as a young aspiring attorney, that when the pandemic hit, she lost her job at the firm, and her name was Danny, and she had all this backstory. And when you delivered that, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is so much to work with and so inspiring to me and I said, oh gosh, I can't wait to see where this goes. And once we add costume, and I remember, so tell me a little bit about how you came up with this character, this attorney, and this whole backstory. Tell me a little bit about her and then how you came up with it.
Absolutely. I love narrative. I love characters. I'm into fantasy and the world that it can create. I love create, and it's especially that little niche for performing. I love being somebody else. I love that like opportunity to really dig into something, and I really enjoyed like my acting classes, and I really took actually a lot of notes from my acting classes from NYU. Is you had to have some memory before you could be the present person.
Mm-hmm.
So that really inspired a lot of, okay, if I'm going to create a character, I need to know who they were before I can portray how they are. And so I pulled a lot from my personal experience. I pulled a lot of the need and the loss from my personal experience. Um, Having lost my identity a little bit, that was something in the dark times that I had to deal with. Is all of a sudden you're not just your job, you're you. So who are you? And all of a sudden you're like, well, I am a person who wants to do my profession. But when you can't do your profession, what are you? And so those were kind of the questions that I was personally dealing with. And so using the movement and the constriction and the small spaces to amplify that being stuck in something you don't want to be in really started the character. And then it saw a couple iterations. We talked a little bit about like a feminist woman who had to be stuck in the kitchen. We talked a little bit about that, but I wanted a little bit more for this character. I wanted something that had a little bit more background. So I looked to my mom, actually, who's a lawyer now, judge, and granted, most of the law field is doing fantastic over Zoom. So that part is maybe a little bit more fantasy than reality, but also in talking with Daniel when we were creating the score, we'll talk about that later, but we talked a little bit about the character too, and there was this idea of she was always going to lose it. She was going to lose that position. This pandemic was just what caused it. So there was a little bit of that detail too. And then she goes through, so then we had to create an arc, right, for the choreography, how to sew the character into this movement that had been created completely separately. And so the arc of the movement I had kind of went from this slow, methodical thinking kind of stuff, that compression of like, okay, I'm not going to overreact, it's going to be fine. That started in kind of phrase 1. And then as we went 2, 3, 4, it started to get a little bit more angsty. It started to get a little bit more physical and thrashy. And so I used that as kind of what the arc was, and that she was starting to lose it. And that really started to inform who the character was and who she, Danny, was home by herself with this small compact space and only being able to do so much and interact so much, and slowly this person gets shrunken and smaller, and eventually she ends up on the ground by herself alone. And so that's
It gives me chills when you talk about it, because I cannot wait for you to see the film. You haven't seen it.
haven't seen it. I'm so excited.
uh, I want to jump ahead a little bit to you're the one that introduced me to Benny Crown, the editor, and it has been a blessing and a godsend to work with him. He's just fantastic, and what he delivered, it always shifted. I'm like, because I did a first cut with him, a second and a third and a fourth, and now we're on like version 4.5, and we're adding the credit roll now. And I think you will be blown away when you see what we created, what you created, but what we did with the hours and hours of material, your character, and then yeah, let's talk a little bit about, because I implored you guys in the first phase when we were creating the movement to not use music, which is so difficult because it already is so random, and then to not have any music. But I had already knew, and I'm not sure when I told you guys, but of course wanted to work with Daniel, because COVID was such a personal thing to him, because his husband got sick right away. So when I asked him, do you want to be a part of this Dancers in Isolation project? He had composed all the music for Earth in 2019. I had worked with him this is our, I think, 10-year anniversary working together. So he was really thrilled, and especially to work with you. He loves you so much, and
long famously, we love each other's sense of drama. I think that also binds us together.
Yeah, I mean, he says such wonderful things about you, and I said, well, that's why she's in the company, because I love Alex so much, and you have such a theatrical actress way about you without trying. You're just a natural. You remind me, and throughout this character, as an Almodovar character, something you would see in like a Hitchcock or a Moldovar, or just like one of these, the character that you created. And I really felt that tension and the meltdown, this meltdown of her spiraling down and down from the mundane to like, it just, her world gets smaller and smaller. But so let's talk quick about the music. Um, I know that Daniel, how the process first started was that he got access to the Google Drive, which is where we organize all the all the 4 sequences, all your notes, all your story, the character you developed, and all of the archives, the photos for each character, for each of the 5 dancers. So I think, what was it like working with him, and talk a little bit about the first iteration that he made for you, and then how you reacted to that?
Yeah, it was interesting because it's one of those things that you learn in collaboration. Is you're going to have ideas and your collaborator is going to have ideas. And at first we were not on the same page. At first he said, okay, I'm gonna create the thing, and I expected, like, okay, we'll talk about a first draft and you'll kind of show me what your ideas, but he didn't want me to hear any of it. He only wants to present like the final piece. That's kind of how Daniel works. Is he gets the ideas, he'll have all these conversations with you about the piece, but he doesn't want you to hear it until it's done. And that's fair, because critique, especially music, when he's programming music, he's not like in a recording studio doing the things by himself. He's programming it. So to have people mess with a program is hard and would be really awkward, and it can get weird. So I get that. But then he gave me this piece and had me listen to it. Didn't give me any context about what he was working with or any kind of like tidbits of like, this is what inspired this, like which pieces he chose. And when I first heard the first piece, it was optimistic. It had this kind of angelic overtone, and it there was a little bit of minor, like, rubbing at the very very climax, but there was maybe like 10 seconds of it, and that was something that I really expressed, that like the movement craves tension. So I only got it like right at the climax, and then he built this beautiful ending. But the middle also almost reminded me of more of like a Pride and Prejudice, like Mr. Darcy going through the mist. There was mystery to it, but it was kind, it was angelic, it was far too optimistic for what Danny was going through.
Yes, and I totally agreed, and that is very Daniel. I mean, and I had specifically directed, once I worked with Daniel about the kind of score that I envisioned, and then brought you into the conversation, and then the 3 of us had a conversation, and then I said, now it's just you and Daniel, like, and so, and he loves you so much, so he wants you to be happy, of course. But I thought the process was going to be, which is what I clarified, was that he was going to deliver a theme, and then you guys would work together on saying, no, I don't really, that melody, or that, that
Right.
I'm not sure about that, and I need more tension. But yeah, that's very Daniel. He does all his research. He goes into this place where he doesn't resurface until the music is done. And in his head, it's like, this is it. This is genius. Here you go. I hope you like it. And
Right.
one of the wonderful things I like about you is like, no, this is not the music for this character and this movement in this setting at this time. And he said, okay, scratch that, right?
Everything. He said, okay, it's starting from bare minimum scratch. And it was interesting too, because after that moment, we had a very long conversation over Zoom
Just
about
you and him, yes.
what this new score was going to be, what starting from scratch, poor guy. but we talked about it, and he said that, okay, well, since this is such a dark time, I don't want to give you guys something so dark that it takes you back there. And we had a conversation about, okay, but this is the depression of it. And he really wanted to make sure that I, as an artist, was okay diving back into that dark feeling and that scary, harsh world that depression can be. And and so he we had this long conversation about what that sounds like, what that feels like, and really a step by step. This is how I picture the. We talked more about the plot, right? About the arc of Danny's section, and then he did the same thing. He went away, didn't talk about it, didn't say anything, and he came back with this absolute masterpiece. I mean, Ryan was sitting there while I listened to it, and I was moving, and I felt it where I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel it right there, and it really dug right back into that. And I like the dark, I like the dramatic, and he spared nothing. Went It was an uncomfortable experience for him as well, because of all those dark feelings he had with his partner as well,
Yeah.
and so his husband. And so he went there, and it really, I think, is so masterfully done.
Yeah, I mean, he titled it Dark City. So, and just a little to clarify too, the music, at this point, you guys had already been in the studio connecting all the phrases, not so much for the film. This was now you guys were in the studio, and that's when Daniel had come into the process. But I had known that once you guys filmed all of your footage, once the footage was edited together, that was going to be the score for your film as well, not just your in-person solo. So we're kind of talking about the same thing, but two different projects. Like, so there's the film and then the in-person performance, which, by the way, I'm not sure if you know this, but we got the open culture bill. So we are going to be performing. I mean, they said yes. So we're on June 13th in New York City, on 26th between 5th and Madison. So we are Uncharted Territory will be performed live. So I'm so excited about that. And
Exciting.
it's very exciting. So yeah, so the music was, I think, when I see it with the film, especially, it blows me away. Like, it just, you feel that frisson, that those goosebumps and frisson every time I watch it. And yeah, like I said, Benny, his editing, it just, he captures. And you guys, so I want to step back in a second. I mean, he captured, edited together exactly what I imagined from when I saw all of the footage, so let's backtrack a little bit about the film, because one of the last phases was, I said, okay, now you guys need to film yourselves in your character, in your costume, and you had a very specific costume of what your character would have worn out at work, right? Like, but she started wearing what she was wearing during the day, and then stuck in the kitchen and cleaning, and just, well, then going to her bedroom, and the coffee and the window, and like it was like kitchen, bed, window, kitchen, bed, window, and this cycle that was just like, and so how was it, when I asked you guys, I mean, because I mean, this is totally all under, we've never done anything like this. So how was it filming all of the movement that you guys had created in character? Um, and and I know that I had a conversation with you guys about taking risks and not just doing it from a horizontal, putting it on a tripod and using different angles. And then that was, I think, like phase 3 is when you guys were uploading all that video footage of once the character, and now we were doing costume, video, makeup, hair, and so what was that like for you? What were the challenges and the risks that you took, because you really went there? And I said, Alex, think about lighting too, like grab some gels if you have them, and you did. You delivered this like incredible these lighting and these shots, and some of those shots that stood out for me was your wonderful partner Ryan assisted you in filming you from above, on projecting down onto the floor. So what was that like for you, filming all, and how
Um,
did it take?
it was definitely a challenge. I've never done any dance film. I've been filmed and I've played a little bit in the studio with some other choreographers I work with, but we never really, like, I haven't done exclusively something that's filmed. And so the challenges are like your face is suddenly very distinct, and that's what you're looking at is the face. And so there was that aspect, and then there was lighting, exactly. And I, being the dramatic person that I like to be, really wanted to play with color. I wanted to play with, okay, what is this abstract space that she's going into? And I think that color would really amplify that this is no longer you're just looking at a person in a space dealing with this thing. You're going into what her mind is perceiving it, and what
Right.
and transition into what this meltdown chaos is. And so I wanted to play with that. And Ryan, being the tech guru that he likes to be, um, had recently bought LifeX bulbs, which can change color via your phone. So I had color to play with, and so I really wanted to mess with it. And we wanted to be, you had also given us the task of being site specific. You said pick a room, pick a space, something where your character exists in. And so the kitchen, especially while we were having the conversation about being a housewife, was really interesting to me, because I had this kind of hallway, this small hallway between two countertops and a wall on the far side. So I really had a small space to work with. It was challenging to make, because I created the movement in a very box space, something that had a little bit more room to travel, something that wasn't quite as linear. So that was also a challenge too, because then I had to change the movement a little bit to squish it into this small space.
Right.
Um, so all those challenges perceive themselves. And then thankfully, Ryan had gotten the new iPhone. And so I had the wide angle that I could use as well. And then I got a tripod so that I could put my phone up in different places and I could hang it off. We did a close one where I like hanged the phone over the counter as it was gripped in there. And then poor Ryan was afraid of heights and he climbed up onto the counter and held the tripod so it was on the ceiling. And so it was looking down at me so I could do the floor phrase, because the floor phrase that we'd created, it it didn't really lend itself to being viewed from the side, which is the only space with those two cabinets that you could see it from. So
Right.
I could view it from this way, but get half of the dimension of what it was, or see it from up top and see the 3D version of it. So we really played with all the angles, and we even like filming tricks off of Instagram and YouTube. Like we took a towel and we put it on the countertop, and then Ryan would drag it along as I was moving as well. So we got this kind of panning shot with the background moving as well. So we really like had some fun with it. We tried to like use all these different angles, and we had one to get the lighting. We had one lamp on the floor facing up and down. And then we had another one stacked up on boxes on a stool that was overlooking from up high so that you could get those cross shadows going in. That's where the color would kind of play on the walls because it was all white and gray. And then with more color, I wanted to play with the costume. And so I had this red dress that really worked well because it had nice slits down the side so I could still move my legs and be fine there. But then the kitchen was all gray and white. And so the color is Danny, and then Danny becomes the color in the space, which I really, really liked the drama of.
I love it. And thank you for telling me how you got that pan shot. It
Yeah.
was a towel. You
The
just
towel. We put the tripod on the towel, and then Ryan just dragged it.
let me tell you, I'm like, how did they do that shot? Because you're just like, it's all of a sudden, it's like your face and it's just the camera's going like this. And it looks like a professional. I mean, the whole thing, all the footage looks like a crew went in. And I had this crazy idea that, okay, you guys got the general concept. Now I want a real cinematographer and a filmmaker to come in and replicate everything. And then I was, because that was my ego, totally. Like I
That quality, you wanted that quality and that sense of like professionalism, what is designed as professionalism, but not necessarily what was needed.
but exactly, and it was already there. It was in front of my face, and I'm saying, "Oh my God, this is so good!" But still, it has to be done with a professional with lights, and then, and then I thought, well, finally, it dawned on me. I had this aha moment where I'm like, "But this isn't that's not the project. This is the project. Is you? The thrilling part is that you guys created all of this, and that's what has to become the film, not someone else's." And yeah, so when I went back and looked at all this footage, and I was like, it's already there, it's done. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Middle of a pandemic, when
Right.
you know what I mean, and then having some people go into your space, and it's just, it was like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm so glad that I surrendered that idea, because
Absolutely.
it's all there. And now that I see the film, I can't say it enough. I'm so excited for you to see it. And I want all your friends and family to see it. It's just, and it's your birthday. Like, gonna be, I, I really hope you like it. I know you will. I, I, they're, all of them are so well done. Yours is just like out of this world. It really is. So I can't wait. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about the project. I'm so excited to see and to get back in the studio and do the in-person phrase and character. Like, I just can't wait to do that. It's been so long. It's been a year since we've been in the studio together, or more than a year. I remember we started working on that Supertramp piece. We had a few rehearsals with Nicole, and we got to get back to that piece. Like, I love that music, and I love the few rehearsals that we had. But then it was, yeah, then it all went away. So the company's suffering a lot right now financially. So it's just been, it was wonderful that we kept working through the heart of the heart of darkness, and we were able to stay connected, and to have a film that encapsulates the darkest time that I've ever lived through, that we've all lived through. And we have an end product of that captures 8 months. I mean, I think how long was the process for you, for all of us, for from beginning to when you were right when you started working on the in-person studio?
When we
Uh,
finally started to like hand it over kind of to Daniel and to
yeah,
stopped filming, that must have been because it started to get cold, I think. So I think it was sometime September, maybe, is what my brain is thinking. But it was
um,
September, October, sometime around there.
it was at least 6 months that you guys were creating from start to finish, of when you finished all your own filming stuff, and then we started working with Daniel. But all in all, now from start to finish, it'll be a year since we've started this project, and I can't wait to premiere it on the 21st. So thank you, Alex, for being here today and talking to me about the project. And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.